Elliott is returning to NASCAR this weekend in Martinsville and reveals some pretty interesting details regarding his surgeries and his injuries. And Dale Jr. basically reveals that he had opportunities to bring his team up to the Cup Series in the last few years. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to go ahead and start by talking about Champions Container. As it was announced yesterday, Champions Container will sponsor Daniel Dye for 4 races in 2023. I believe Champion Container has sponsored GMS Racing in the past, so glad to see their return to sponsor Daniel Dye, and really excited to see their new sponsors coming into play to sponsor Daniel Dye this weekend. Love when new companies and new sponsors come into play. Really exciting stuff. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Martinsville Purse money. As every single week we have a NASCAR Cup Series, Xfinity Series, and Truck Series race, Bob Pockers puts out the purse money that's going to be for the weekend. And according to him, the Cup Series race will have $7,324,203. For the Xfinity Series race, it's $1,403,623. And for the truck race, which could happen tonight or tomorrow night, it'll be $693,842. That's a pretty good money for the weekend. Obviously, the Cup Series is going to have the most money with the charter money and stuff. But I think that money for this weekend, especially for the Xfinity Series race, is some pretty good money. Overall, good money for this weekend, and I'm looking forward to the race weekend at Martinsville. I think it's going to be some pretty exciting stuff. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Randy LaJoie and Kyle Larson. As it was announced over the last couple of days, of course, NASCAR has been doing the greatest 75 NASCAR drivers. And on Wednesday, it was announced that Randy LaJoie had been inducted into the NASCAR 75. Yesterday, Kyle Larson also got inducted into the NASCAR 75 as well. Randy LaJoie, 2-time Busch Series champion, won a lot of late model races as well, and also was someone who played a big part in the future of safety in NASCAR. So I think he well deserves the opportunity to get into the top 75. Kyle Larson, NASCAR Cup Series champion, won a lot of races at this point, or is going to win a lot more races in his career as well. I think both have well earned the opportunity to get into the NASCAR 75, and congratulations to both of them in getting into NASCAR's greatest 75. I think they both absolutely deserve it. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Ross Chastain. As it was announced early this morning that Ross Chastain is going to run a late model for Nice Motorsports in a race at Georgetown Speedway on the weekend of the Dover race on April 28th. But this is really great to see that Ross Chastain is getting involved with Nice Motorsports in more ways than one. Nice Motorsports, I believe, has also been a big part in their late model program as well. So really, I think it's a great opportunity for Ross Chastain to get some more experience in late model racing, get more dirt racing. We've seen more NASCAR drivers do dirt racing, which indicates maybe there's going to be more dirt racing on the schedule in the future. Overall, though, this is going to be really fun. I didn't expect this, but I think it's really fun nonetheless to see that Ross Chastain is doing some more late model racing to get better dirt racing going forward. I think it's really exciting stuff. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about the Chicago Street Course. Now, yesterday, Adam Stern put a tweet out about Chicago Street Course, and according to him, the Chicago Street Course will at least have 2,000 barriers to be placed, and NASCAR's testing equipment, including mufflers, when it comes to noise mitigation. Now, we've talked about Chicago Street Course quite a bit on this channel for more reasons than one. Obviously, been a lot of negativity around the Chicago Street Course, but they are working with NASCAR to try to make it as good of an event as possible. Now, there's been, like I said, been a lot of negativity toward the Chicago Street Course event overall. Though I am going to say that I think that if you're in the city, you probably should support the event overall, because I think it would be really good for the city, and a lot of money can go into the city as well with this move. I don't think after 2023 it will happen, but I think after 2023, I think there won't be an event at the event. Nonetheless, so I think it's really important that the people in the city do support the event, and hopefully the event can be a big smash hit. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Joseph Newgarden. Now on the CW, there's going to be a new IndyCar Series that's going to be coming out called 100 Days to Indy, which I believe has already been basically been presented and has already begun, if I'm not mistaken. And Joseph Newgarden basically threw some shots at Drive to Survive, saying that there's no need to fabricate this series. Obviously, Drive to Survive has been accused in the past of basically fabricating their series, which a lot of people have accused Drive to Survive of doing, which they have admittingly basically done some fabrication for the show business. With this new 100 Days in Indy, basically what the hope is that it can basically do a really good thing of promoting the series in a positive light and not fabricate and basically be a series which is genuine. like I said, Drive to Survive has been accused many, many times of not being a genuine series. And overall, I think if series is genuine, I think it is really good for IndyCar, and I'm really excited for this new 100 Days to Indy. I think it really grew the sport overall, and I'm really happy to say that they are doing this. I'm really excited for the show. It looks like a really good show in my honest opinion, and I'm excited nonetheless to see the new Drive to Survive series that's going to be coming out, which is IndyCar's version of Drive to Survive. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Dawson Cram. As it was announced yesterday that Dawson Cram is going to drive the 07 for SS Greenlight Racing this weekend at Martinsville. Now, initially on the entry list, it was supposed to be Seven Parsons supposed to drive the 07 car, but Dawson Cram is getting another opportunity and another chance. I believe Dawson Cram has already attempted to qualify for a race, I believe, for the 74 CHK Racing Organization, but unfortunately, he failed to qualify earlier this year. I think it might have been in Atlanta. I'm not entirely sure. But this is a really good opportunity for Dawson Cram. Dawson Cram has made select Xfinity Series and Truck Series starts in his career. Honestly, has not done a bad job overall. So good to see Dawson Cram getting another opportunity. I think this car has a little bit of an issue with owner's points right now, but I think he make the show if it does get qualified out and it gets rained out later today. So we'll see what happens. A great opportunity for Dawson Cram nonetheless. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Stephen Malozzi. As it was announced on Wednesday evening that Stephen Malozzi is going to drive the 22 for AM Racing this weekend at Martinsville. Now, Stephen Malozzi was supposed to drive the 34 truck for the Ram Brothers Racing Organization, but now it's been changed and he will drive the 22 for AM Racing as Josh Rayum is going to drive the 34 truck this weekend. Steve Malozzi will be attempting to make his second career NASCAR Truck Series start. Actually, I think he'd be locked in if it does get qualified out later today. But Steve Malozzi, pretty talented, up-and-coming talent. He has made a start in Mid-Ohio and actually finished in a respectable position. I think he finished in the top 25 for Ram Brothers, which is pretty impressive at Mid-Ohio. I think it's a great opportunity for him overall, and I'm excited to see that Steve Malozzi is getting another shot to drive in the Truck Series. I think he's going to do a really good job, to be honest. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Tommy Baldwin. As it was officially announced on Wednesday evening, or actually yesterday as a matter of fact, that Tommy Baldwin has been named the competition director at Rick Ware Racing. Now, Tommy Baldwin has already begun working with Rick Ware Racing, and that began at Bristol. If he's already been working with the team at Bristol, we've already seen some big moves at Rick Ware Racing already. J.G. Elliott had an impressive qualifying performance, qualifying and starting in third position at Bristol and finishing the top 20. And both cars, before they had issues, were in the top 21 point in the race. But this is a massive pickup nonetheless for Rick Ware Racing. Tommy Baldwin, a legendary crew chief. I think he won some races as a crew chief as well. Started his own team, had some decent success. And there's been a lot of success that's come from Tommy Baldwin. In fact, he almost took the job of being Jeff Gordon's replacement crew chief, I think back in 2002 or 2003, which meant that he was basically someone that a lot of people were looking at. Nonetheless, though, I'm really happy for him. He deserves this opportunity. I'm excited to see he's become the competition director of Rick Ware Racing. I really believe that Tommy Baldwin is going to play a huge part and a huge role in helping this team going forward and making this team a very successful organization going forward. I'm really happy that Tommy Baldwin is getting this opportunity. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Josh Berry. Now, we're going to talk about Chase Elliott later in this episode because we already know that Chase Elliott is returning this weekend at Martinsville. But it was announced and basically revealed from Hendrick Motorsports that Josh Berry is going to be on standby for Chase Elliott this weekend at Martinsville. Makes a lot of sense. Josh Berry has a lot of experience in Martinsville, has in fact won a race at Martinsville back in 2021 in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. And we all initially thought that he was going to be running the NASCAR Cup Series race at Martinsville, but it was also announced that Chase Elliott was going to be returning. But Josh Berry makes a lot of sense. That's if Chase Elliott cannot make it all 400 laps. As of now, Chase Elliott is planning to run all 400 laps this weekend. But I think it makes a lot of sense for the driver who's been the oval driver for the number 9 car in every race outside of the Dakota. It has made a lot of sense for him to continue to get a little more experience if Chase cannot make it all the way. I think this is a really good decision by Hendrick Motorsports to have him on standby. Great decision over there. And overall, if Josh Berry gets to run Martinsville, I think he really can help Chase Elliott out a lot. I think Chase hopefully can make it all the way. We'll talk about Chase Elliott here in a little bit. But overall, nonetheless, I hope Josh Berry gets to make at least a few laps, but I think Chase Elliott will probably make it every single lap. And unlike previous years, this is only a 400-lap race, so it's a shorter race compared to the fall race, which is a 500-lap race. At least it's going to be a little shorter, so Chase may have a little bit better shot of getting there. Nonetheless, nonetheless, so it's good to see that Josh Berry basically is good to go on that front, and he'll might get an opportunity to make some more starts this year. We'll have to wait and see. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Brad Keselowski. Now, there's basically been this thing that Jeff Gluck does pretty much every single week where he does 12 questions with certain drivers in every form of racing. That includes IndyCar, but mostly NASCAR. And Brad Keselowski revealed basically that he actually almost drove the 5 car back in 2009. Now, this, of course, was before Mark Martin would take over the 5 car in 2009. But Brad Keselowski was actually about to be announced and was actually getting ready to go to media days and was going to be announced to drive the 5 car for the 2009 season. Now, obviously, like I just mentioned a second ago, they did not end up happening. Brad Keselowski ended up staying in the number 88 car for Junior Motorsports for the 2009 season, and then it was officially announced he would basically be driving, at least I think for 2010, in the number 5 car. However, that ended up changing because Brad Keselowski moved over to Team Penske in the 2010 season, and of course he ended up going on to win the NASCAR Xfinity Series Championship in the 2010 season for Team Penske. He started running full-time for Penske as well. But then in 2008, made some select starts for Hendrick Motorsports and was supposed to be the driver in that 5 car. And that's actually true. We knew that this was going to be factual. We knew that it was correct, that he was supposed to drive that 5 car. And actually, he also revealed that he had the contract signed with Hendrick Motorsports as well. Could you imagine how much success Brad Keselowski could have had if he drove for Hendrick Motorsports? I know that 5 car was really good in 2009. He was probably going to win races and be a championship contender right off the get-go. He had a pretty successful 2008, got a couple victories in the Xfinity Series, which of course at the time was a nationwide series. But I think that he could have been a championship right immediately if he got behind the wheel of that number 5 car. But he didn't drive the 5 car. But imagine how much success he could have had if he drove that 5 car as early as he did. But I think at the end of the day, Brad Keselowski doesn't regret it. He's been really successful with Penske, won a championship with Team Penske, and only his 3rd year at the organization, and brought a lot of success to the Team Penske group, and now is owning an organization in his own right, in his own way. So, nonetheless, it's very interesting, and imagine the potential possibilities if Brad Keselowski had driven the car that he had driven. It would have definitely been very, very interesting for sure. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jeff Gordon. Now, Jeff Gordon went on Sirius and NASCAR radio, and also he talked a little bit about him talking about Chase Elliott potentially returning. But Jeff Gordon also talked and spoke on the Hendrick penalties that they have received. Now, what they basically said and what he actually revealed on Sirius and NASCAR radio is he basically cleared up a lot of stuff that basically happened. Basically, last year in 2022 with the Lubers, because that's where Hendrick Motorsports actually initially got the penalties, which were all for all 4 drivers, not Chase Elliott time, but for Kyle Larson, William Byron, and Alex Bowman, all had received 100-point penalties and dropped back. The reason was they actually were told that they were good to go ahead and clean up those Lubers that were on the car. Turns out that they thought all the teams were going to do that as well. Well, it turns out when they basically showed up to the racetrack, none of the teams ended up cleaning up except Hendrick Motorsports, because they were told to go ahead and clean up those Lubers to fix some of the issues, because basically with the Chevy cars, and they thought, like I said, all the teams were going to do the same, but it turns out that all the teams did not end up doing the same thing that Hendrick Motorsports ended up doing. Overall, it's very interesting to hear, though, that Hendrick Motorsports almost could have gotten it. They thought that every other team was going to do it. All the other teams are basically going to cheat, which indicates that they're kind of also maybe shocked and surprised that they end up winning their appeal. Because remember, Hendrick Motorsports had major penalties, and all their points penalties basically got rescinded. They still had to basically the huge fines they had to pay, which the appeals penalty and appeals board basically agreed that they broke the rules, but they basically have new appeals and stuff that changed. Hendrick Motorsports caused those rules to basically go in effect and go and basically change. It's very interesting that Jeff Gordon brought that up. I'm glad that Jeff Gordon came on and talked about it. Again, he talked a little more about the issues with the communication on their part as well, and they're surprised at some of the issues with the communication there. That being said, though, nonetheless, it's very interesting, and it's definitely interesting for sure to look at. Now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about North Wilkesboro. Now, there's an extra little podcast that Dale Jr. Dallin, or basically Dale Jr.'s company does, that basically Kelly Earnhardt and Marcus Smith do. And on the second podcast, they basically have Mike Davis there. Mike Davis actually asked a question about, is there a potential possibility that North Wilkesboro in the future could become a points-paying race? Well, Marcus Smith basically said on that said podcast that he says that a schedule has not been worked on yet, but could North Wilkesboro be a points paying race? It could potentially be a points paying race for 2024. Obviously, I think with the All-Star race, it is in an audition for this race to eventually become a points paying race for the 2024 season, which I think North Wilkesboro definitely deserves a points-paying NASCAR Cup Series race. Obviously, it's going to host the All-Star race in 2023, and there's been a lot of excitement around it. It feels like for this year, it's like the Field of Dreams moment, where North Wilkesboro is back on the NASCAR Cup Series schedule. Yes, it's for the All-Star. It's not a points-paying race, but it's the first NASCAR race that's taken place at North Wilkesboro since the 1996 season. Of course, the Truck Series is going to host the first points-paying race of any NASCAR's top-tier divisions since the 1996 season. And I think that's going to be a really good race as well. But I think that in the future, and I think, I'll be honest with you guys, I think there's a really good chance and a really good shot that North Wilkesboro will become a points-paying race in the 2024 season. I think the chance of that happening are pretty high at the moment right now, and I think that that could end up happening in 2024. But again, there's a lot of stuff that they're indicating. COTA is expected to return in 2024. They're indicated they're expected to come back there next year. Of course, SMI basically rents that track, so they have to approve the contracts. This is a contract year for that, so they're expected to return. There's been a lot of talk about Bristol Dirt, if that's going to come back or not. I think there's a good chance that that is going to come back, but we'll have to wait and see what happens in regards to that going forward there. But I think North Wilkesboro will be a points paying race in 2024. I think there's a really good chance of that happening. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Dale Jr. Now, we're going to talk about Dale Jr. here in just a little bit, but the first story is about Dale Jr. talking about that he wants NASCAR to race on an oval track internationally. He says, I think it would be really, really awesome. Not going to a road course, but going to an oval racetrack. And I 100% agree with Dale Jr. on that fact. I think that they should go to an oval track internationally. Now, there are a lot of tracks that are oval internationally. You do have the Twin Ring Motegi Circuit. I think that track might be close. But what if they reopen that and go to Japan? Because NASCAR has publicly talked about that they want to go race somewhere internationally. But when you go international, there's a lot more road course tracks. You don't have a lot of oval tracks that are outside of the United States. Most tracks you go to are road courses because a lot of kids in Europe, they learn on road course types of tracks and they don't learn on oval types of tracks. And you don't have a lot of ovals outside of the United States. So Twin Ring Motegi, if we're talking about a racetrack that's outside of the United States, I think Twin Ring Motegi, which is a really awesome oval track as well that puts on really good racing, I think it could put on a really awesome and a really great show. But I really want to see NASCAR go international. Now, if they basically go international, they would obviously probably go out to Canada or they would go to Mexico first. Now, obviously, if they go to Canada, a lot of people are going to look at Montreal, and personally, Montreal definitely, to me, should be on the schedule. But there are some oval tracks in Canada out there. I think you got Sunset Raceway that's out there. You've got Donington Park, maybe. I think that's maybe a road course. I'm not entirely sure. But you got a lot of short tracks that are out there, some dirt tracks as well, nonetheless, that are on the schedule. And I think Mexico's also got some shorter ovals as well that they could easily run. And I think if they went to an oval track, I think that'd be really, really fun and really, really awesome. So hopefully that ends up happening. And if it does end up happening, I think it could be really, really good for the sport. But we'll have to wait and see what happens. But I think an oval track in NASCAR could be really, really fun for the sport overall. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Kevin Harvick. Now, Austin NC from Sports Now put out a really interesting article around Kevin Harvick, talking about that Kevin Harvick, according to him, has received interest from race teams looking for his leadership. He says down to do it down the road, it wants to understand what is on his plate, though, going forward for the next 6 months. And Bob Cox actually noted that some teams have looked at Kevin Harvick for some leadership roles in working inside of NASCAR as well. Now, Kevin Harvick, of course, has a lot on his plate. He's basically going to be focusing on helping his son out get through his racing career. But also, Kevin Harvick in 2024 is actually going to be joining the Fox Sports broadcast booth on a full-time basis. It's going to be Mike Joy, Kevin Harvick, and Clint Boyer, unless Fox decided to make some changes for 2024 as well. But Kevin Harvick being an owner or being like part of an ownership group or something like that and working with a team will be very interesting. Now, if Kevin Harvick is to do this in 2024, what teams could he work with in the future? Obviously, the most obvious would be Stewart-Haas Racing. Kevin Harvick, I think Stewart-Haas Racing, losing Kevin Harvick and him not driving is going to hurt Stewart-Haas Racing in the long run. If Kevin Harvick came higher up as Stewart-Haas Racing, was making a lot of decisions for Stewart-Haas Racing and how the car is handled, I think it really could help out Stewart-Haas Racing in a big way in a big light. And if he became a owner of Stewart-Haas Racing, became like Stewart-Harvick Racing, where KHI came back to play, because we know that Kevin Harvick has shown interest there, it'd be really cool for Stewart-Haas Racing if Kevin Harvick came back there. The next one I'm going to mention is Kevin Harvick Incorporated. Obviously, Kevin Harvick Incorporated is actually returning this year in 2023. They're reopening that for the first time since, I believe, the 2011 season, and they're returning to the late model side of things, where Kevin Harvick is going to make some late model starts, and also his son Keelan is going to make some late model starts as well, I believe maybe in the car store as well, if I'm not mistaken. And then he also had potential, another team I'll mention is JTG Daugherty Racing. There were rumors going around as early as last year that Kevin Harvick was looking to basically take an ownership role in JTG Daugherty Racing. And at the time, it was because of the fact that you had Ricky Stenhouse Jr., who was part of KHI management, being there. Kevin Harvick could really help out JTG Daugherty Racing in a big way. Now, I don't think it's going to be initially happen where Kevin Harvick does become an owner in NASCAR. I think it's going to take some time for Kevin Harvick to make the decision on this front. But I think eventually in the next few years, I don't know if it'll happen in 2024. I think it's going to be at least 2024. We might pump the brakes on 2024. But I think eventually Kevin Harvick, I think, will want to stay inside the sport and work inside the sport. And I think it'd be really good for an organization. Personally, if I'm looking at a team to basically work with, I'm working with Stewart-Haas Racing to make that organization better, because Stewart-Haas Racing is definitely on decline right now. And I think if he stayed with Stewart-Haas Racing in a leadership role or an ownership role side of things, I think it'd be really, really good and really great for the sport overall. So we'll see what Kevin Harvick decides to do. I think it'd be really good for him, though, to work in ownership group of Stewart-Haas Racing, build that team back from the ground up, and fix some of the issues at that team, because Stewart-Haas Racing's had a lot of problems, and I think he could help a lot of those problems at Stewart-Haas Racing, but we'll have to wait and see what happens. And now we'll go ahead and jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode, as we're talking about Junior Motorsports once again. Now, I've talked about Junior Motorsports quite a bit on this channel, and it's due to Junior Motorsports potentially jumping up to the NASCAR Cup Series. Well, we got a very interesting detail, and Oscar Kanensky from Sportsline put an article out this morning in regards to that. And apparently, Junior Motorsports actually revealed on that Chip Ganassi Racing episode that he actually passed up on some opportunities to go cup racing not too long ago. He says, we're trying to get people to come off the idea of what a charter is worth. They're in fantasy world right now. We had some opportunities in the past to make some moves, and we wish we could have taken those opportunities a long time ago. Now, it's those years been rumors that Dale Jr.'s team have been interested to buy some charters to get up to the NASCAR Cup Series. And we've talked about Junior Motorsports going up to the Cup Series now. It seems like for a long time. Really started about 2 years ago. The rumors really started then, when basically at the time, Dale Jr.'s team had indicated back at the Martinsville race that Josh Berry won in 2021 that he had interest in going cup racing then. And we've been following the story for the last 2 years. Now, obviously, what is the biggest thing holding him back right now? The charter system. The charter system right now has gotten more and more expensive. Now, Dale Jr. probably should have taken those chances then, because charters back in the early, in 2021, they were like $10 million at the time. I think Dale Jr.'s team had interested maybe in that Starcom sponsor, basically that Starcom charter at the time, but they never took that opportunity there, because eventually that Starcom charter went over to 2311 Racing for that second car, so that Kurt Busch could get the opportunity there. But charters now have gotten more expensive, and they're around $30 million at this current moment. Now, the big question going around at this particular moment, at this particular time, do I think Junior Motorsports will go cup racing? I think there's a very strong chance that they will in 2024. Now, yesterday, and there was a lot of people, including myself, who got teased by this a little bit. We thought that there was a render came out for Junior Motorsports Fan Day, and we thought that that was going to be an announcement for a Junior Motorsports Cup Series car. Turns out that wasn't the case, and shout out to Ryan Williams for basically correcting all of us on it, saying that that was the Hellman's car that's going to be revealed on May 25th, and we all just need to do a better job of reading. But we got teased. But it looked like a next-gen render, but we all thought it was, and it turned out it was not a next-gen render. So we all thought that would be the case. But I'll say this. Do I think Junior Motorsports is going to go cup racing? Yes. 2024, I think they're going to. And I think we're going to keep talking about this every time it does happen we get any updates. But I think they will jump up in 2024. Now, if they do jump up in 2024, who do they go with? I think you got to look at some drivers. I think you got to look at Eric Jones. I think you got to look at Martin Truex Jr. potentially. I think you got to look at maybe Matt DiBenedetto. Kyle Weatherman's another name I'm going to mention. I think Junior Motorsports definitely does have to look at those are the main candidates. And then they got to look at their drivers in their organization. Josh Berry, Sam Mayer, Brandon Jones. I mentioned all those drivers as potential possibilities. I'll even mention out of nowhere, maybe Haley Dean gets pried away from Ford and they pull her up to Junior Motorsports. I think that'd be a crazy possibility, but you never know. I've seen wilder things happen in the sport. But if I'm looking at Junior Motorsports, Eric Jones, a lot of great talent. He'd be fun to have. And then you got to look at other teams that could be potential possibilities that they could get a charter from. I think you look at two teams right now. Spire Motorsports and Rick Ware Racing. Spire Motorsports, they have two charters currently at the moment. That 77 car right now, I just don't think they've got the speed to contend currently at the moment right now to be up front. I don't know if that charter will stay around long term. And of course, Junior Motorsports is working with Spire Motorsports in the NASCAR Xfinity Series here to give Carson Osvar some opportunities and some shots. I think that could be a potential possibility right there that they could go get that charter. And I think maybe they put Carson in that car maybe, or Josh Berry in the car. That could be a potential possibility. And then I'll also mention the other possibility, and that being Rick Ware. We know the situation is going on with Rick Ware right now. Does Rick Ware lose that Biohaven sponsorship? That could be a potential possibility. Nonetheless, though, this Junior Motorsports story has been falling for a very, very long time, and I think there's a really good chance and a possibility that it could happen in 2024, but we're not sure at this point if it's going to happen. We'll keep following the story as time goes on, but it's very interesting. They basically had opportunities to make moves. They didn't make the move yet, but I think they could make the move, but it's getting close to that time to make the move because we are in the middle of April now, and we're getting closer and closer to the later portion where they have to make a decision if they're going to pursue a charter or not. And you got to think about TV deal coming up and the revenue sharing deal that's coming into play. It'll be very interesting to watch what happens going forward. I think Junior Motorsports, like I said, will make the move to Cup, but we'll have to wait and see what happens. And now we'll go ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we are talking about Chase Elliott. Now, we talked about and did a little special report on this on Wednesday about Chase Elliott making his official return to the NASCAR Cup Series this weekend at Martinsville. Obviously, we covered it on the channel, and he's making his return this weekend at Martinsville. He has also received a playoff waiver, so he will basically be eligible to run for the playoffs if he's able to win a race. Now, we'll talk a little more about discussion in a second, but currently Chase Elliott, at this point right now, he is 134 points below the cutoff line at this current moment right now. So he's going to have to win a race or maybe two races at this point to get into the playoffs. So he's going to have to win a race nonetheless, but he's got that playoff waiver, so he's good to go there. Now, Chase Elliott spoke to the media yesterday about some very interesting and brought some very interesting insight in regards to the surgery. He basically says he has a few screws by the top of the tibia and basically had that. He says and also revealed that even though he basically got injured from snowboarding, he is not planning to stop snowboarding as it's something that he does with his life. It's relaxing therapy and it gets him prepared for the weekend. He said it was just an accident and also basically kind of reiterate something that I said not too long ago, that basically you can fall off the top of stairs. You can get injured by very small things, and basically you can have some normal things happen to you and you can get an injury. We saw that basically with Daniel Herrick. He was doing a workout, getting prepared for a race, and he got an injury. So he doesn't plan to stop snowboarding. And he also revealed he had a couple fractures on his tibia as well. He went on a lot of media shows, including the Pat McAfee show as well, which I think going on the Pat McAfee show itself, I think is really, really good for the sport. Because 30 to 40,000, I think there were like 50,000 people watching that stream at one time. And Pat McAfee is one of the biggest sports personalities in the world right now, on YouTube especially. And when you're on a Pat McAfee show, it's a really big deal. Yes, Pat didn't have as much knowledge about NASCAR, but I think if he watched NASCAR, he would do a great job in learning it. And you have to also think about as well, he's actually planning to also donate $100,000 if Chase does win this weekend. Now let's talk a little bit more about Chase Elliott as well. Do I think Chase Elliott is going to win immediately? No, I do believe that it's going to take Chase Elliott a little bit of time to get acclimated and get back to being used to the NASCAR Cup Series car. Remember back in 2015 when Kyle Busch, he came back from his injury in 2015. Kyle Busch did struggle a little bit back. It took him a little bit of time to get used to being back in the Cup Series car. I think it took him about 4 or 5 weeks, but eventually, once he got back to being used in the car, he started performing a lot better and went on to win a championship. Now, that's another question we need to ask is, can Chase Elliott win the championship this year and do what Kyle Busch did in 2015? That's going to be a really tall order for Chase Elliott to do. A little more taller order than Kyle Busch, because back in 2015, there was no playoff points, no stage points, all that stuff that were awarded. Because in 2015, like I said, you didn't have those back then. Now in 2023, you have playoff points and stage points, and Chase Elliott has not received a lot of play. In fact, he's not received any playoff points this year. So he's going to have to win a couple races to even have a shot at it, and he's very low in the points. And I don't think he's even seen him getting back in the top 16 in the regular points. So he's definitely for sure in a must-win situation. But I think by the end of the year, and I think that it's very no question for me, I think he will make the playoffs this year, and I think he will for sure be a contender for the championship this year by the end of the season. I know how a lot of people feel about the playoff waivers and stuff, but they give him out like candy at this point. But I do agree that Chase Elliott definitely deserved the playoff waiver. I know a lot of people were against him getting a playoff waiver because he did snowboarding. We've seen people get injuries, some other things, and they've gotten playoff waivers, including Tony Stewart in 2016, which even some people back then were in disagreement. So at least they were consistent on that front. But I think it is nonetheless really good for the sport that Chase Elliott is back in the NASCAR Cup Series. It's been a while since he's back, and you look at the TV ratings too. I don't think TV ratings immediately are going to come back up, but I think the fact he had people that don't normally watch NASCAR, there's a lot of McAfee's fans that watch the show, they're not the biggest NASCAR fans in the world. I think a lot of people probably saw that are fans, and they're going to root for Chase Elliott this weekend. And wouldn't it be incredible if Chase Elliott did come back in his first start and went on to win? I'm not saying that it's going to happen. I think it's going to be very tough for him to get around 400 laps. It's a tough track to come back to, but he did say as well to the media that if he didn't feel ready to come back, he wouldn't be back. And I think he's confident that he is going to be extremely competitive. And I think nonetheless, when you look at TV ratings and all that kind of stuff, him being back in the NASCAR Cup Series overall, I think is really good and really great for the sport overall. So I'm very happy that Chase Elliott is officially returning this weekend at Martinsville, and I think this is very, very good for the sport. I think TV ratings are only going to get better, and nonetheless, I'm very happy to see that Chase Elliott is officially back in the NASCAR Cup Series this weekend. When it was announced, I was really pumped, really, really excited, and I cannot wait to see what Chase Elliott can do this weekend. I think Chase Elliott would at least get 2 or 3 wins by the end of the year. I don't see him winning the championship. It'd be cool if he did do what Kyle Busch did in 2015, but I think it's going to be a much taller order to get that done. I would love for it to happen, and I think there's a chance it could happen, but I'm not seeing it happening. But I think he'll have a good year because, again, I think he's going to be fun to watch when he's back, and I think he'll be very, very competitive, and I expect Chase Elliott to have a pretty good year in 2023. After missing a lot of races, I think he's going to make up a lot of ground and a lot of points, and he'll have a chance to get back in the championship hunt. So, that is going to be today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like, subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Links description below with that, and comment below your thoughts below on today's video. Do you think Junior Motorsports jumps up in 2024 or not? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And how excited are you that Chase Elliott is returning this weekend in Martinsville? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Later tonight on the channel, we are going to be having the NASCAR Truck Series race view, pending the weather, of course, if that does move through. Then tomorrow, I might have a special video on the channel. I'm not entirely sure yet. Followed by the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Martinsville. The weather's looking good then. And then Sunday, we'll have the NASCAR Cup Series race review for Martinsville. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode. And I'll see you guys next time for some more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.